Hi everybody, I wanted today to show you the very original guitar. This is number one, the very first guitar I ever made totally by hand. It wasn't made in my workshop, it was actually made in my father-in-law's workshop over in North Creek in Norfolk. I had some very basic tools and the rest I borrowed from him. I had a bandsaw and I had a table planer. Although why I particularly chose those two tools I'm not quite sure. Probably could have done it better if I'd have had other things, I guess. But what you don't know when you start out is what you're going to need. It's basically mahogany with a maple top. Solid on the back, everything's laid in from the front. The fingerboard is ebony. The neck is rather large. I'm sure you can probably see how big that is, but that's most of an inch deep at the nut. And you can also see not a lot of headstock angle, which is quite deliberate. I was going to fit a tremolo to it, but I went back to my original design and stuck to what is basically an ES 1275 tailpiece. And again, you can see there's not a lot of angle over that bridge because I did not want to create kind of a hard edge for strings to break, because I wanted this to be the only guitar I was using live. So around 2009, I was busy making an album, a solo album, and I took a lot of guitars into the studio. Lots of single coils, lots of humbuckers. I had 3 amps in there. I had an AC30, a Cornford. I think I had a Blue Angel in there as well. I had loads and loads of tones on the album. The album was meant to be a bit of a guitar fest for me, really, an opportunity to play lots of guitar. And while that was all very well, it was very difficult to take all that stuff on the road. I wanted a guitar that would give me lots of different tones so I could just make a big difference across the set when we played it live. So the original guitar didn't have this scratch plate. It had a tortoiseshell scratch plate with a volume control, a tone control, a 3-way switch which operated just these 2 pickups, and a pair of switches here which operated this pickup so it could be tied into anything that came off of that switch. So basically this was a Telecaster with this added on with a phase switch down here and an in or an on-off switch. And it worked pretty well. When I came back here and started teaching with it an awful lot, I just found that this switch down here was in the way. So when it had a nasty accident in about 2015 when we moved house and the entire neck was smashed out of the body, you have to remember the neck joint goes all the way up to here. And it was a real nasty smash inside the body. The whole thing came away. When I put it back together again, I thought, well, I had these Trisonics. Let's find out if the Brian May circuit sounds as good in a solid body guitar as it does in his. And it's not bad. This is pretty much the sound that I was using live with the TEB, I suppose back in 2010. It's basically a Watkins Dominator style amp with not a lot of gain, and I would get all the gain from the front end of it by just adding a tube screamer. This is what the guitar generally sounds like. It's the bridge pickup. Here's the middle pickup. And the neck pickup. Now the interesting thing, of course, was back in its original configuration, you could just add the middle pickup. Now that would sound like this. Or you could add it to the neck pickup, which would sound like this. Get the phase switch around the right way. Or you could put the main switch, the sort of Telecaster switch in the middle, and have this in as well. So you'd end up with all three pickups. But the truth of it was, for me on stage, the amp was never quite enough. I couldn't run it hard enough to get it to break up as much as I'd like it to, even at 18 watts. So I would stick a tube screamer on the floor, which would then make it sound much more like the sort of sounds that I had on the record. But because there was a lot of clarity in the pickups, it was quite easy to turn them down and get a nice, sweet sort of a sound. And the same with the neck pickup. I always found it very, very easy to play. The very large neck with my very small hands you would think would cause a problem, but actually it was the other way around. I was finding that when I was playing a 60s Strat, I was actually getting some cramping in my left hand. As soon as I went over to this big chunk of a neck, the kind of heavy bending style that I had back at the time just seemed to, and actually made it easier to play this way, because I could really get hold of a string and give it a real shake, and I had something to get hold of. I guess that's some of the influence of Paul Kossoff coming through, that I used to really want something to get hold of and really shake the guitar. Now, of course, what I didn't have was this phasing kind of thing, you know, that comes with the Brian May style circuit. But actually, that gives you some really interesting tones. So, for example, my favourite one is to have these two out of phase, and that's a cool sound. But of course, the very famous sound that you'll hear from Trisonics is the Brian May tone from Bohemian Rhapsody, which is these two out of phase with each other, which of course sounds like this. Interesting tone, not one that I ever use a lot on stage, I have to say. I was really very much either using these two together or just using this one on its own most of the time after I got this circuit fitted. What I did find was really interesting was to have all three on and just alter the phase of one of them. It was great for playing sort of funky rhythms. So that's the sound of all three, which is incredibly thick. Take the bridge pickup out of phase and it lightens the whole load up. Now, if we just take the middle one out of phase, the effect is totally different. Taking the neck one out of phase is different again. And in fact, as you go up and down the neck, because of the phase differential, it almost sounds, to my ears, like you're kind of rocking a wah pedal slightly, which is interesting, but maybe not as useful. But there it is. And this is the guitar that I've used for a large part of the last 12 years since I built it. It's always been dead reliable. It has really never let me down in terms of breaking strings. It's never broken strings at the bridge. That is still the original bridge unit. I've never done anything to it. The only thing I had to replace, apart from repairing the neck, of course, was this pickup, which died. And, I just called up Barry at Burns and asked for another one. He takes your credit card details and he sends you one. They're really good for that kind of thing, for supplying spares. And there's nothing really particularly unusual about it. It has got some chambers in it, but they aren't really making any difference in terms of the acoustics. It's really just a question of taking a little weight out, because this particular piece of mahogany was a little bit heavy. Locking tuners, rear disc locking tuners. Nothing special. They're sort of a cheap no-name brand. Mother of pearl dots. That's really all it is. It was just a simple design that I'd had knocking around for a lot of years, and it kind of got me started. Anyway, thanks for watching the original #1 Edwards guitar.